In a small American town where the scent of warm bread drifts through quiet streets and hope rises with the early morning sun, a man arrived carrying a secret heavy enough to break a heart, yet powerful enough to transform one. People thought Ashen was poor, quiet, ordinary. They never imagined he was testing the world, while God was testing him. This is a story where humility opens doors, truth becomes the turning point, and love, real love, sits at the table God himself prepares. And when everything hidden finally comes to light, one woman will discover that the man she thought she knew was standing at the crossroads of faith, redemption, and destiny. Stay with me until the very end. What happens in the final chapter might change the way you see love, forgiveness, and second chances forever. Subscribe now for more redeemed heart stories. The morning sun spread a soft gold over Willow Creek as Elena pushed open the bakery doors, the aroma of cinnamon and rising dough greeting her like an old friend. She tied her apron, brushed flour off her hands, and whispered a small prayer for strength. It was a quiet town, predictable in the best ways. But today something in the air felt different, like a page turning without warning. Ashen stood across the street, hands in his pockets, studying the bakery sign as if it held the answers to a question he had carried for years. Clothes simple, hair slightly messy, eyes thoughtful. He looked like just another passerby. But his heart beat faster than he expected. He hadn't come here for bread. He had come searching for truth. Elena unlocked the window latch and lifted it slightly, letting the morning breeze roll in. As she did, she noticed him. Standing alone, almost hesitant, something about his stillness made her pause. Not pity, curiosity. Ashen caught her glance and offered a small, polite smile. It wasn't practiced or charming, just genuine, the kind of smile people gave when they had nothing to prove. Elena's chest warmed unexpectedly. New in town? She wondered aloud. He crossed the street slowly, as if giving fate time to breathe. "Morning," he said, voice gentle, carrying a warmth that didn't match his worn jacket. Elena nodded, noticing the dust on his shoes. He looked like a traveler, or maybe someone who had been wandering for too long. "You open yet?" "Always," she laughed softly. She pushed the door wider, stepping aside so he could enter. Ashen hesitated, taking in the smell, fresh bread, honey, and something comforting. A place that felt like refuge. He stepped in with reverence. She moved behind the counter, grabbing 2 mugs. "Coffee?" "It's on the house today." Ashen blinked, surprised by the kindness. Not many offered him anything without expecting something back. "Thank you," he murmured. Elena poured the coffee carefully, the steam lifting between them like the start of an unspoken bond. Ashen watched her hands, noticing the small flour stains on her knuckles. Hands that worked, hands that served, hands that were real. He wrapped his fingers around the warm mug, grounding himself. "This place, it feels peaceful," he said. Elena smiled, wiping the counter. "That's the goal. Life is hard enough out there." Her words settled in him more deeply than she intended. Ashen looked around, small tables, wooden shelves, old photographs of community picnics and church potlucks. A life lived with sincerity. A life he had once longed for. A life he had been too afraid to trust. Until now. "Are you staying in town?" she asked, while arranging pastries behind the glass. Ashen paused mid-sip. "I haven't decided yet." But the truth was simpler. He didn't know where he belonged. Not anymore. Elena nodded softly as if she understood more than he said. "People come to Willow Creek for different reasons," she replied. "Some to hide, some to heal, some to start over." Ashen felt his breath catch. It was as if she'd read the secret he carried. He set the mug down gently. "I guess I'm somewhere between all 3. Elena's eyes softened, the kind of softness that didn't judge. "Then you came to the right place." Sometimes kindness was its own prophecy. Ashen glanced toward the window, watching the first townspeople walk by. Couples holding coffee, parents rushing kids to school, the morning unfolding like a familiar story. He had never lived anything like this. But something inside him whispered that maybe he could. Someday. Elena packed a small bag of warm rolls and slid it toward him. "Here, on the house. Consider it a welcome." Ashen's eyes widened, unused to gifts without strings. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because you looked like you needed it." He swallowed hard, emotions rising unexpectedly. Simple gestures had always meant more to him than grand ones. And this woman, with her steady eyes and flour-dusted apron, had just offered him something he hadn't felt in years. Dignity, and a place to rest. "Thank you, Elena," he whispered, saying her name as if it were precious. She smiled, wiping a strand of hair behind her ear. "Come back anytime." Her voice carried warmth enough to thaw winter. Ashen felt something shift inside him. As he stepped outside, the bells on the bakery door chimed softly, like a blessing over the day. He looked back once, just once, and saw Elena rearranging pastries with quiet grace. A stranger, yet somehow already familiar. A beginning he didn't see coming, and the first place he didn't want to run from. Elena wiped down the bakery tables as the morning rush began to fade, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet man with gentle eyes. Ashen had something different in his presence, something she couldn't name. Not sadness exactly, more like someone carrying yesterday on his shoulders, and trying hard not to let it spill. Across town, Ashen walked the small streets of Willow Creek with the warm bag of rolls pressed to his chest. The simple gift felt heavier than gold. No one knew him here, yet Elena had treated him as if his worth wasn't up for negotiation. People in his old world didn't treat others like that, not unless there was something to gain. He found a bench near the town square and sat down, watching children chase each other around the fountain. Their laughter echoed like freedom he had never truly tasted. His life had always been scripted, meetings, arrangements, expectations. Here, life just happened, and for once, he could breathe. Back at the bakery, Elena made a second pot of coffee, humming softly to herself. Her co-worker, Mia, noticed. "What's got you smiling like that?" she asked with a grin. Elena rolled her eyes. "Just met someone new." Mia leaned on the counter dramatically. "A cute someone new?" Elena froze for a second, then laughed. "I didn't say that." But her silence said everything. Ashen returned to the bakery after lunchtime, unsure if he was intruding or welcome. The bells rang as he stepped in, and Elena looked up instantly. For a moment, the world paused. Her smile came naturally, effortless and warm. "You came back." He nodded, trying not to reveal how much that simple greeting affected him. "I hope it's okay," he said softly. Elena motioned toward the counter. "Of course it's okay. Sit anywhere you like." He chose the corner table, close enough to see her, far enough not to interrupt. Elena carried a fresh mug of coffee to his table. "No charge," she said before he could protest. His brow lifted. "You're going to make it impossible for me not to come back." Elena chuckled. "Maybe that's the plan." As she walked away, Ashen felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Belonging, not earned, not bought, just offered. He held on to that feeling tightly. From the kitchen window, Mia whispered to Elena, "He's back." Elena whispered back, "Stop staring." "I'm not staring." Mia whispered louder, "I'm observing." Elena nudged her playfully. "Same thing?" Ashen watched the two women laugh, wishing he could freeze the moment. He wasn't used to laughter that wasn't at someone's expense. His world had been filled with sharp edges and expectations. This one felt soft. Safe. Elena approached his table again, wiping flour from her cheek with the back of her hand. "So, how's Willow Creek treating you so far?" Ashen looked at her for a moment before answering. "Like it's the first place I've breathed in a long time." Elena's smile softened. "You talk like someone who's been running," she said gently. Ashen's throat tightened. "Maybe," he replied, eyes drifting to the window. "Or like someone finally tired of pretending." Her words hit closer than she knew. The wind outside changed direction, blowing leaves across the street. Ashen watched them, feeling oddly seen. Elena didn't know his story, yet her intuition brushed against truths he hadn't admitted out loud. He wondered if God sometimes spoke through people like her, people who noticed the invisible. "Do you have family here?" she asked. Ashen shook his head quickly. No, no family here. But the weight behind those words hinted at deeper fractures. One's still bleeding. Elena nodded softly. Well, you're welcome here as long as you need. We don't judge in this town. Ashen blinked at her kindness, unsure how to hold it. That kind of safety was foreign to him. But he wanted to learn it. She headed back to the counter, leaving him with the comforting hum of the bakery. Ashen folded his hands, feeling a promise stirring, quiet and new. Maybe God had brought him here for a reason. Maybe healing didn't look like grand gestures. Maybe it started with coffee and warm bread. Before leaving, Ashen stood by the door and looked back at Elena one last time. She was wiping the tables, humming again, lost in her own little universe. He smiled, whispering to himself, I think I'll stay for a while. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like running. It felt like coming home. Ashen returned to the bakery early the next morning, long before most of the town was awake. He stood outside for a moment, watching the soft glow spill from the windows. There was something sacred about the place, like it held the kind of peace he'd been begging God for without knowing how to ask. He finally stepped inside. Elena looked up from kneading dough, surprised but pleased. You're becoming an early bird, she teased, brushing flour from her cheek. Ashen smiled shyly. Couldn't sleep. He didn't mention that her kindness had kept replaying in his mind. As she prepared the pastries, Elena noticed the shadows beneath his eyes. You look tired, she said gently. Ashen lifted one shoulder. I've been tired for a long time, but something in his tone hinted at more than sleeplessness. Before she could ask, the bakery door swung open and Mr. Callahan, one of the town's most irritable regulars, stormed in. His voice boomed through the shop. Elena, I told you yesterday that my bread was undercooked. Ashen flinched at the harshness. Elena straightened herself calmly. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Callahan, she said, keeping her tone steady. I'll make sure today's batch is exactly how you like it. But the old man wasn't satisfied. He slammed the counter with his cane. You need to learn how to do your job right. Ashen stepped forward instinctively, protective heat rising in his chest. That's enough, he said, voice low but firm. Mr. Callahan turned sharply. And who are you? A customer, Ashen replied, steadying his breath. The tension crackled between them for a moment, but Elena gently placed a hand on Ashen's arm. It's okay, she whispered. Her touch softened him instantly. She looked at the old man with steady compassion. Mr. Callahan, let me fix this for you. As she prepared a fresh loaf, Ashen watched the scene quietly. Elena didn't defend herself with anger or fear. She defended herself with grace, the kind he had only ever seen in people who had walked through storms and learned to love anyway. He exhaled, humbled. When Mr. Callahan finally left, grumbling but satisfied, Ashen turned to Elena. You didn't deserve that, he said. Elena shrugged gently. People get upset. Sometimes it's not about us. Her eyes held a wisdom he couldn't ignore. Ashen sat at his usual table, watching her wipe the counter as if nothing had happened. But inside, something was shifting for him. No one in his old life had ever handled conflict that way. He had seen shouting, defensiveness, ego, not peace, not humility. Elena came over and handed him a warm croissant. Here, she said. On the house again. He stared at it, then at her. You're going to make me spoiled. She laughed. Maybe Willow Creek needs one more spoiled man. Ashen took the first bite, closing his eyes for a moment. Not because of the taste, though it was perfect, but because of what it symbolized. Kindness. Earned by nothing. Given freely. Back where I'm from, he began slowly. People don't handle anger the way you did. Elena leaned on the table, curious. How do they handle it? Ashen hesitated. With power or pride? Elena nodded thoughtfully, her expression soft. Sounds exhausting. Ashen let out a breath that felt like truth escaping. It is. His voice cracked just slightly. She didn't press him, didn't ask for details or explanations. She simply said, You don't have to be that person here. The words struck him like a quiet miracle. He lowered his gaze. The bakery filled with morning sunlight. warming the space between them. Ashen felt something settle in his heart, something he hadn't known in a long time. A sense of being seen, not for status or wealth, but for who he was beneath it all. He looked at her with a soft kind of wonder. "You defended me today," he said quietly. Elena shook her head. "No, I defended peace." But Ashen knew it was more than that. As he left the bakery that morning, he carried not just a fresh loaf of bread, but the echo of Elena's quiet strength. He didn't know it yet, but her grace was becoming a mirror, one that reflected the man he could be, not the one he had been pretending to be. And as he stepped into the sunlight, Ashen realized something undeniable. He didn't want to live hidden forever. Ashen walked back to his rented room at the small inn on Maple Street, the cool evening breeze brushing against his jacket. He carried Elena's words with him like a gentle weight. "You don't have to be that person here." But who was he really? And how long could he keep pretending? Inside the room, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase he kept locked. It held the life he was hiding: designer clothes, letters from board members, papers with his family name stamped in gold. Proof of everything he was trying to escape. And everything he feared would push Elena away. He closed his eyes, chest tightening. He wished he could tell her, not just the truth of his identity, but the truth of his exhaustion, of living a life built on expectations, power, and image. But he didn't know how to start, or how to end the lie without ending whatever fragile connection was forming between them. Fear pressed against his ribs. Meanwhile, Elena prepared to close the bakery for the night, humming softly as she wiped the last table. The scent of warm sugar lingered in the air, comforting and familiar. Yet her thoughts kept drifting to Ashen, his quiet strength, his gentleness, the shadows behind his eyes. There was something deep he wasn't saying. She felt it like a whisper. Mia flipped the sign to closed and came to lean beside her. "So, mystery guy came back again today," she teased. Elena rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed. "He's just different." "Different how?" Mia pressed. Elena hesitated. "He feels like someone who's trying to disappear and be seen at the same time." Mia exhaled softly. "That sounds complicated." Elena smiled sadly. "Most people are." Ashen returned the next morning, but something in him felt heavier. Elena noticed it immediately. His eyes didn't shine the way they had before. He held himself too carefully, as if afraid one wrong word might reveal everything he was hiding. "Rough night?" she asked gently. He nodded, unable to lie in the small ways. "Yeah, something like that." Elena didn't push. She simply handed him a mug of coffee. "Here." No questions attached. The kindness made him swallow hard. As he sat at his corner table, he watched the townspeople chatting, ordering pastries, laughing together. A normal morning in Willow Creek. And yet, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something fragile. He longed to step into the truth, but fear rooted his feet. Elena approached with a plate of warm muffins. "Try these, they're new." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Elena noticed. "Ashen, you don't owe me details. But you look like someone carrying a secret alone." His breath hitched. She was too perceptive, too close to the truth he wasn't ready to reveal. "It's nothing," he murmured, eyes shifting away. But his voice betrayed him. Elena sat across from him, surprising him. "You don't have to tell me," she said softly. "But don't pretend you're fine if you're not." Ashen felt a crack form in the walls he had built. Her compassion was disarming. For a moment, he considered telling her everything. His name, his family's empire, the wealth he'd walked away from. But the fear burst louder. What if she only liked the version of him that struggled? What if the truth made him exactly like the men she had learned not to trust? He swallowed the confession. "I just need a little time," he said finally. Elena nodded slowly, accepting the boundaries. "Time is okay," she replied. "Just don't disappear without a goodbye." The fear in her voice was subtle but real. Ashen's heart clenched. The last thing he wanted was to hurt her, but lies had a way of bleeding into the truth. He felt trapped between the man he pretended to be and the man he feared she would reject. He looked down, ashamed. A quiet tension settled between them. Not cold, not distant, but fragile. Elena stood and returned to the counter, giving him space. Ashen watched her, feeling the distance he had created. He wished he could bridge it, but honesty felt like a cliff. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window slightly, like a warning. Ashen knew the truth wouldn't stay hidden forever. Secrets had a way of cracking open at the worst possible moment. And he wasn't ready. Not yet. As he left the bakery, Elena watched him go with a quiet ache. She sensed the storm gathering behind his gentle smile. And Ashen, walking down the street with his hands in his pockets, whispered a silent prayer. God, give me the courage to be seen. But courage often arrives through breaking. Morning settled gently over Willow Creek, painting the streets with gold as Elena opened the bakery. She expected to hear the soft chime of the door and see Ashen walk in with that quiet half-smile of his. But he didn't come. Not at 7, not at 8. The clock moved past 9, then 10. Still no sign of him. She tried to bury the uneasiness, but his silence felt louder than any absence she'd known. Mia noticed immediately. You're worried, she said softly. He never misses a morning, Elena murmured, kneading dough without focus. Mia shrugged. Maybe he overslept, but Elena shook her head. That's not it. Across town, Ashen moved quickly down Main Street, shoulders tight, breath uneven. His past, the one he tried so desperately to outrun, had finally found him. A sleek black car sat near the square, completely out of place in a small town like theirs. He knew exactly whose car it was, and why they had come. The back door opened and a man in a tailored suit stepped out, adjusting his tie with irritation. "Mr. Ashen Hale," he called, loud enough for half the town to hear. Ashen closed his eyes briefly as if bracing for impact. "Not here," he whispered. But it was already too late. Too late, because Elena, carrying a tray of fresh bread to the outdoor tables, heard the name. Hale. A name she'd only seen in newspapers, on financial reports, gala invitations, one of the wealthiest families on the East Coast. She turned slowly, disbelief freezing her in place. "Ashen Hale?" she breathed, barely audible. The suited man glanced at her, then at Ashen, recognizing the confusion instantly. Ashen felt the world collapse beneath him. Elena was right there, right in the moment his secret shattered. "I can explain," Ashen said at once, stepping toward her, but Elena stepped back. Not in fear, in hurt, in the quiet breaking of something she didn't want to name. Her expression was a fractured mirror. Shock, betrayal, disappointment. "You lied," she said, voice steady but trembling beneath. Ashen lifted his hands helplessly. "Elena, I didn't want... You didn't trust me," she cut in. The man in the suit crossed his arms, impatient. "Mr. Hale, we have a scheduled meeting. The company is awaiting your return." Company. The word struck Elena like a blow. He wasn't poor. He wasn't simple. He wasn't who she thought. Ashen ignored the man completely. "Elena, please. I needed a place where people didn't see my last name first. I needed a break from the noise. I needed..." She stopped him, voice shaking. "You could have told me the truth." "The truth is terrifying," Ashen confessed, eyes shining. "And I was afraid of losing this, losing you." Elena looked away, fighting to keep her emotions contained. "So you built everything on a lie?" Her voice cracked on the last word. People inside the bakery began to stare. The warm, comforting space suddenly felt sharp and exposed. Elena swallowed hard. "I need to get back to work," she whispered, and she turned away before her heart could break in front of everyone. Ashen reached out but stopped himself, the distance between them widening like a wound. The suited man placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Hale, we should leave. There's nothing more to do here." Ashen brushed his hand off. "Not yet." But when he looked toward the bakery door, Elena was already gone, vanished into the back room, hiding where he couldn't follow. Ashen felt something collapse inside his chest. The lie he thought he controlled had now destroyed everything, and he had no way to undo it. Truth never arrives gently when it's been buried too long. He took a shaky step back, staring at the bakery as if it held a life he'd just lost. "I messed everything up," he whispered. The man sighed. "Sir, please." Ashen's eyes lingered on the window, on the table where he'd sat every morning, where he'd laughed for the first time in years, where he'd found peace he didn't know he needed, and where he'd met Elena. Now all of it felt impossibly far away. When he finally stepped into the car, a hollow ache spread through his chest. The door shut with the finality of a sentence he'd written himself. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass, fighting the pain clawing inside him. Outside, Willow Creek moved on like any ordinary day. But inside Ashen, everything had broken, and the truth had delivered the final blow. The drive back to the Hale estate felt longer than any distance Ashen had ever traveled. He didn't look at the city lights or the passing fields. He only saw Elena's face, hurt, broken, pulling away from him. It replayed like a punishment he deserved. Silence filled the car like judgment. At the estate, he stepped out without a word, ignoring the staff waiting at the door. The halls felt suffocating. Echoes of a life he'd abandoned pressing in from every side. Portraits of men who had built empires watched him with cold, unblinking eyes. He didn't want their legacy. He didn't want this world anymore. He shut himself inside his old study, locking the door behind him. For the first time in years, he let his guard fall completely. He sank to the floor, breath trembling. "God, what have I done?" he whispered. But the only answer was silence. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness. It was the heavy, aching kind. The kind that forces a man to face truth without escape. He pressed his palms to his eyes, remembering the warmth of the bakery, the gentle steadiness in Elena's voice, the peace he had found in her presence. He realized then that he had used her kindness as a hiding place. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that he would never be loved without his wealth. Fear that if he showed his scars, she would turn away. Ironically, the lie had caused exactly that. Across town, Elena stood alone in the bakery kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain filling the room. She washed dishes slowly, her hands trembling more than she admitted. She felt foolish for believing in him, for trusting someone who had walked into her life with a mask. Yet beneath the hurt, there was something else. Grief. Mia peeked into the kitchen, concern etched on her face. "Elena, talk to me." But Elena shook her head. "I just need quiet." Mia nodded, stepping back, giving her the silence she sought. Silence wrapped around Elena like a blanket she couldn't escape. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. "How could he do that?" she whispered. But her voice cracked, not from anger, but from the loss of something that had barely begun, and something she never asked for. She walked to the small window and looked out at the empty street. The chime of the bakery door echoed in her memory. His shy smile, his gentle presence, the sincerity she thought she saw. Was any of it real? She asked the quiet room. Yet deep down she knew the answer. Ashen's eyes, those carried truth, even when his words didn't. And that truth was what made the betrayal hurt even more. Because she had seen goodness in him. Back at the estate, Ashen lit no lights. He sat in darkness listening to the storm outside. He had faced hostile boardrooms and ruthless businessmen, but nothing had ever terrified him like the thought of losing Elena forever. He whispered again, "God, tell me what to do." A memory surfaced. Elena saying softly, "You don't have to be that person here." He realized she had given him a gift he never earned, a chance to be new, and he had shattered it with a lie. Still, the memory didn't condemn him. It called him higher. The storm deepened outside, wind rattling the windows. Ashen stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulling out an old Bible his mother once gave him. He hadn't opened it in years, but tonight, he needed something more than guilt. He needed direction. The pages fell open to a verse he hadn't read since childhood. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Ashen exhaled shakily. He felt crushed, but maybe Maybe God was still near. He sank into the chair, gripping the book. "I don't know how to fix this," he confessed into the silence. "But if you're still here, show me how to become the man she thought I was. Not wealthy, not powerful, just honest," he whispered. Across town, Elena stood in the dark bakery, hands still trembling. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Not a prayer, she wasn't ready, but a quiet surrender to what she felt. The town fell silent as the storm eased. Two hearts sat in two different rooms, separated by miles of truth and fear, yet both whispered the same unspoken thought. "God, if there's still something here, help me see it." It was the kind of silence God often used. And while neither of them knew it, grace was already moving. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet corners of their hearts. Softening, reshaping, preparing. For truth. And for a redemption none of them could yet imagine. Ashen woke before sunrise, the storm from the night before still lingering in his chest. He washed his face, stared at his reflection, and barely recognized the man looking back. Not because of wealth or status, but because he saw a heart that had been broken open, a heart finally ready to change. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for expensive clothes. He pulled on simple jeans and an old flannel shirt from a forgotten drawer, clothes that didn't speak for him, clothes that let him be human. He inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of honesty press against his ribs. He left the estate before anyone else was awake, driving toward Willow Creek. Not to see Elena, but to serve, to show, not tell, to rebuild what his lie had shattered, even if she never took him back. At the community center, volunteers were already unloading boxes of donated goods. Ashen approached quietly, hands tucked in his pockets. The coordinator, a woman named Ruth, raised a brow. "Can I help you?" "Yes," he said. "Tell me what you need." Ruth studied him for a moment, then handed him a pair of gloves. "Start with the food shelves." Ashen nodded and got to work. No instructions needed, no praise expected. He stacked boxes, swept floors, carried crates of canned goods. Heavy work he had never done before. His muscles burned, but something inside him loosened. Humility had a way of unclenching stubborn hearts, and his had been clenched for too long. Ruth eventually walked over, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You new around here?" Ashen paused, then answered truthfully, "Yes, and I'm trying to figure out how to be better." Ruth nodded knowingly. "Aren't we all?" By midday, Ashen was helping repair a broken shelf, kneeling on the floor with a drill. A few volunteers recognized him, not as Ashen Hail the Heir, but as the quiet man who helped without complaint. That was the version of himself he wished Elena had met from the beginning. He tightened the last screw, exhaling softly. "God, keep shaping me." Across town, Elena returned home after a long morning shift, exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. She brewed tea, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. Every memory of Ashen hit her in waves. His gentle smile, his soft voice, the sincerity she thought she saw. It all hurt more because it hadn't been entirely false. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, whispering, "Why did he lie?" Not angrily, just brokenly. She wanted to hate him, but her heart refused. Later, she walked to the small church near her house, needing fresh air. The sanctuary was quiet, sunlight streaming through stained glass. She sat alone in the back pew, not praying, just breathing. She whispered into the stillness, "God, I don't know what to do." It wasn't a request for answers, just an offering of pain, a soft surrender, a space to let truth settle. Meanwhile, Ashen kept working long after the volunteers left. He repaired broken chairs, swept the hallway twice, and reorganized supplies. Every act felt like a step toward becoming the man God had wanted him to be, and every step reminded him of Elena, of the woman whose kindness exposed his deepest need. That evening, Ruth returned to lock up and found him still there. "You're still working?" Ashen nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just finishing the last shelf." Ruth crossed her arms. "Whatever you're trying to fix, it's working." He smiled faintly, humbled. I'm not doing this for praise, he said quietly. Ruth nodded. Good. Because real change never is. Her words sank deep. Truth always does. When Ashen finally stepped outside, twilight had set over Willow Creek. He stood on the sidewalk watching families walk home from dinner, children laughing, neighbors greeting each other. It struck him how simple life could be when stripped of pretense. How beautiful. How honest. He whispered into the cooling evening air. If I ever get another chance with her, I want her to meet this version of me. Not the runaway heir. Not the man hiding behind fear. But the man God was rebuilding. Ashen walked toward the quiet street, feeling a faint, unfamiliar peace following behind him. He wasn't healed yet. He wasn't whole yet. But for the first time, he wasn't running. He was becoming. Elena woke before dawn, her heart still heavy but no longer chaotic. Something had softened after her time in the quiet church. Not forgiveness, but clarity. A sense that the story wasn't finished. She arrived early at the bakery, unlocking the door as the sky shifted from indigo to pale gold. The world felt suspended in a gentle silence. She placed fresh trays in the oven, letting the familiar routine ground her. But as she worked, her thoughts kept drifting to Ashen, to the truth behind his eyes. Across town, Ashen stood outside the bakery, hands trembling inside his pockets. He wasn't sure if he should enter. He had rehearsed what to say at least 100 times. None of it felt enough. But his heart whispered, "Try." He stepped inside quietly, the bell chiming softly. Elena looked up from behind the counter. For a moment, neither spoke. Not because of anger, but because emotions pressed too deeply for words. Ashen removed his cap, the simplest gesture of respect he could manage. "Elena, I came to apologize, truly." She swallowed hard but didn't turn away. He continued, voice steady. "I didn't hide who I was to manipulate you." He took a slow breath. "I hid because I was tired of being loved for the wrong reasons. For my money, my name, my position." He shook his head softly. "I didn't think someone like you existed." Elena exhaled shakily. "Someone like me?" Ashen nodded, eyes glistening. "Someone who treats a stranger with dignity, who sees people, who offers kindness without expecting anything back." His voice cracked. "I wasn't escaping from you. I was escaping from myself." Elena stood still, thinking of every quiet moment they had shared. Nothing felt false in those memories. Not his laughter, not his gentleness, not the way he listened. Ashen continued, softer now. "I know I hurt you, and I'll carry that regret. But these last few days, I've been working at the community center, volunteering, learning how to be someone honest, someone God can rebuild." He lowered his gaze. "And someone worthy of standing in front of you." Elena's heart tightened. Not from pain, but from recognition. She had asked God for clarity. And here he stood. Not perfect, not polished, but changed. She walked slowly around the counter, stopping a few steps from him. "You should have trusted me," she whispered. Ashen nodded immediately. "You're right. I should have." Silence settled between them. Gentle, not heavy. Elena studied him quietly. "You said you were running from yourself. Are you still running?" Ashen shook his head, his voice low. "No, I'm learning to stay." She breathed deeply, her walls softening. "Then maybe there's something still here." Ashen's breath caught, hope flickering like a fragile flame. He didn't dare move. He let her lead. Elena looked down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "I'm not asking for perfection, just truth, just presence, just someone who doesn't hide." Her voice softened. "Can you be that?" Ashen nodded slowly, not in desperation but in sincerity. "Yes, I can be that. I want to be that." And she believed him, not because of his words but because of the transformation in his posture. She stepped closer, just enough for hope to fill the space. "Then we start slowly," she said. Ashen nodded again, emotion tightening his throat. "Slow is good, as long as it's with you." A small, genuine smile curved her lips. She reached for a chair and motioned. Sit. I made fresh bread. And we can talk. Ashen's eyes softened, filled with gratitude. He sat, hands trembling slightly. Elena joined him, the morning sun warming their table. And just like that, two hearts that had been torn apart by fear and truth sat across from each other, choosing honesty, choosing growth, choosing grace. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It was better. It was the table God chose for them. The days that followed moved gently, as if Willow Creek itself understood the fragile blooming taking place in two hearts. Ashen kept returning to the bakery, not out of desperation, but out of presence. He helped Elena close shop, sweep floors, restock shelves. Small things that said more than apologies ever could. Elena watched him quietly, seeing the man he was becoming. Trust didn't return overnight, and Ashen didn't expect it to. He showed up with consistency, not charm. With humility, not excuses. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or promises, only with truth. And Elena, in her quiet strength, let him rebuild at her pace. Some days they talked for hours, other days they said almost nothing. But silence between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like peace, a peace shaped by God's careful hands. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ashen walked Elena home after closing the bakery. Fireflies flickered in the warm dusk and the small town glowed like a postcard. They walked without hurry, their steps falling into a gentle rhythm. At her door, she paused. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Ashen asked softly. "For not giving up," she said. "For letting God change you. For showing me who you really are." Ashen lowered his head, emotion tightening his voice. "Elena, you saw the broken parts of me before I ever let myself see them. You treated me like a man worth becoming. You gave me space to grow." He lifted his gaze slowly. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor that." The porch light warmed her face as she looked at him. Not with the innocence from before, but with the mature tenderness of someone who had walked through truth and come out stronger. She didn't reach for his hand. Instead, she said, "Come to church with me this Sunday." Ashen nodded immediately, not to impress her, but because healing had led him back to the God he once pushed away. And because if he was going to walk beside Elena, he wanted to walk beside God too. As she stepped inside, she turned back one last time. A small smile touched her lips. Gentle, real, full of promise. Ashen breathed deeply, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude into the night air. The kind that rises not from certainty, but from hope. And so, their story didn't end with perfection. It ended with presence, with truth, with grace rediscovered in the simplest place. A table God had chosen long before they ever knew each other. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe for more redeemed heart stories. Your support helps these stories reach even more people who need hope.